Alright, so last lesson we started looking at right angle triangle trigonometry, and we just looked at finding a side length when you've been given the other two sides. Today we're looking at what happens when you actually have an angle in those triangles. So in this first one here I've drawn a right angle triangle. We all know that the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle, so I've written that in. And we're going to use the abbreviation H for hypotenuse this time. Now the opposite side will be opposite whatever angle we're dealing with. So if we're dealing with this angle here, which we call theta, opposite that is your opposite side. So once you've got your hypotenuse and your opposite sides decided, the other one is the adjacent side. Adjacent means next to. So this side here is next to this angle. You might go, well, so is the hypotenuse, but the hypotenuse has already been labelled, so this is the other side that's next to that angle. Okay, so look at the next thing that we need to learn, and it's the three trig ratios, or trigonometric ratios. And they are sine, cosine, and tangent. But we abbreviate them to sine, cos, and tan, and the calculator keys are also got those abbreviations on them. So the first one is sine. Sine theta is equal to the opposite side over the hypotenuse. Cos theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. And tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. So we're just using the first letters of those words to write the formulas down. Alright, a mnemonic is a way of remembering something. So this is a way of learning a rhyme to help you remember these three trig ratios. So some old hags can't always hide their old age. The first one, if you look at the first letters, S-O-H. That's sine is opposite over hypotenuse. The next one, can't always hide. C-A-H. Cos adjacent hypotenuse. And the last one, their old age, T-O-A. Tan opposite over adjacent. Okay? Some boys like to remember it by just learning SOHCAHTOA. That's fine. It is in groups of three. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cos is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tan is opposite over adjacent. Okay, so I'm going to go through some examples just being able to use those ratios. Alright, so in the beginning here we have for the marked angle, and in this case that theta would be our marked angle. We're finding the sine, cosine and tangent ratios. They've used the proper words here. We can use the abbreviations sine, cos, tan. So our first one, sine theta equals O over H. We're going to write that down each time. So we've got our formula in front of us. There's less likely that you're going to make any mistakes. So now, there's your theta. The opposite side is opposite that. So that is O. Our hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle. So that is H. So we can write sine theta equals 55 over 73. Okay, cos theta equals A over H. So this would be our adjacent side, the only one we haven't marked. So that's going to be 48 for our adjacent side over 73 for our hypotenuse. And our last one here is tan. So tan theta equals O over A. So tan theta equals 55 over 48. Alright, next triangle. Now this time, their marked angle is done just by colouring an angle in like that. So that's the one we're concentrating on. And we're going to call it R because that's the letter that's written there. So we have sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. We're looking from here. Our opposite side will be opposite that. Okay, our hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle. And just mark these things in with your red pen as you're going. So we're going to write sine. Now we're going to write R because that's the capital letter at that angle. The opposite side is this one. Now there's nothing written on it, but the two letters on the ends of that side are S and T. So we call that ST. You can call it TS if you like. On the bottom we have the hypotenuse. That's this side here. That would be RT or TR if you want. Okay, the next one we're doing is cos. So cos theta equals A over H. The only one we haven't labelled is the A, so we can put that in now. So cos R we're going to do, remember? Now the adjacent side is this one, so we're going to write SR over the hypotenuse RT. Remember, you can alternate those two letters and it's still right. All right, tan theta, we're doing tan R. Opposite side, ST. Adjacent side, SR. Okay, next question. Here's our new triangle that we're looking at. And they've asked you specifically for cos x at the beginning. So we've got to look at where the x is. And our cos would be our adjacent over our hypotenuse. Right? The hypotenuse is opposite your right angle. Your adjacent side is the other side next to it. So cos x is going to be 4 over 5. All right, the next one, we're doing tan y. Now this is where you have to be careful. So I'm going to use my blue pen to do anything to do with the y angle. All right, tan is opposite over adjacent. So opposite the y is this side, and the adjacent side to the y is this side. So just be careful you're not mixing the two up. All right, so tan y, opposite over adjacent, 4 over 3. Okay, and the next one we're doing is sine x. So we're going back to the red pen for this. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. This is the opposite side to x over the hypotenuse. So it's 3 over 5. Okay, next one, sine y. Right, so sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite side is 4. Hypotenuse is 5. Write it down. Okay, the next triangle. So they've given us this one this time. And the questions they're asking are a little bit different. So they want you to complete this. So in other words, after sine, cos and tan, it's always an angle. All right? In the formulas that we learned, it had a theta there, and theta always represents an angle. So we're trying to write in here what angle we need to put to get a sine of ij over hj. So let's have a look at it. Here's ij, and here's hj. Well, hj is definitely the hypotenuse. ij, now, it depends on the question, doesn't it? So we could be relating it to the alpha or we could be relating it to the beta. But for sine, remember sine has to be opposite over hypotenuse. So ij must be the opposite side. So what's it opposite? It's opposite the alpha, isn't it? It's opposite alpha. So the angle that has to go in there is alpha. Okay, let's look at the next one. So we've got cos of some angle is hi over hj. All right, hj is definitely your hypotenuse, so that's good. Now the top should be adjacent, so hi has to be the adjacent side. All right, and that's adjacent to alpha. So this is also going to be the alpha getting written in there. All right, now let's look at the next one. Tan of what angle is ij over ih? Well, we know that tan is opposite over adjacent. So we're looking at ij, that one, and that has to be the opposite side. It's opposite alpha as well, isn't it? Unfortunately, I haven't given you any of the ones that needed a beta answer. Okay, but for instance, if they said to you, they might have said to you, tan of what angle equals ih over ij. If I gave you that one, you'd go, all right, well, tan has to be opposite over adjacent. So you come over here and you go, all right, ih has to be the opposite side. Now, what's that opposite? It's opposite beta. So that one would have a beta answer, but I didn't give you that one to do, did I? Maybe you can add that one in as part D. All right. Right, the next question we're doing involves another triangle, and they've asked us to write a correct trigonometric, which is trig, ratio involving x or y and this fraction. Okay, so let's have a look at it. 60 over 11. So we're looking at these two sides here. This one and this one. So we're not involving the hypotenuse at all. So which trig ratio has the opposite and the adjacent sides in it? That's tan, right? So we're going to start this by writing more tan. Now, which angle is it that has 60 as the opposite side? It's this one, isn't it? Okay, that would be the opposite side and that would be the adjacent. So the angle we're talking about is y. So we're writing tan y equals 60 over 11. So they're a little bit trickier, just got to think about it a bit more. Now our last one is 11 over 61. I'll change the colours for this one. So we want 11, this one, over 61. Now we know this is the hypotenuse. But the 11, what is that? Well, let's just write this in as the hypotenuse first. So the 11 might be opposite the x. Okay, so it's opposite if we're looking at x. But if you look at the 11, it's adjacent if you're looking at the y. Okay, so we can write this two different ways. We can look at the O over H and say, well, I know that's sine. And I can write sine x equals 11 over 61. Or, if I look at the 11 being the adjacent side for the y, well, that would be A over H, right? So instead of O over H, it's going to be A over H, which is a cos of y equals 11 over 61. So both of those would be right, okay? You've got two answers in that last question that could be correct. You can write sine x equals 11 over 61, or you can write cos y equals 11 over 61. Okay, so I'm coming back in the next video and we'll do some more examples.